This episode is sponsored by Kiteworks.
They say, look, understand this. The engine of the economy for your business is technology. I don't care if you're in construction and healthcare and finance, if you're making widgets, it doesn't matter. Technology is the driver of your business. It is the engine of your economy. Without technology, your machines won't work. You can't bill. You can't communicate. You can't do anything. That's why you need standards and practices for infrastructure, IT support. The CIO is keeping the lights on, managing the infrastructure that is driving the engine of the economy. And the cybersecurity team is the shield for that engine. We're the early warning sensors on the car before it hits. Then we're the airbags and the seatbelt.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Manoj Tandon. Welcome to Dark Rhino Security Confidential. We have a fantastic guest here today. But before I introduce him, I do want to remind you folks, show us a little love, smash the like and subscribe buttons. Let us know, leave comments. It's important. It makes a difference so we can keep bringing this great content to you. Now, without further delay, glad to introduce Nick Espinosa. Nick has been in the business for over 25 years, believe it or not, and he's done a lot of pretty amazing things. He founded Windy City Networks. He created Security Fanatics, and he has worked with a lot of medium and enterprise level companies. He's a board member, advisor, contributor to several cybersecurity organizations like Roosevelt University, the COVID-19 Cyber Threat Coalition, and the Cyber Peace Institute. He's an award-winning author, TEDx speaker, and the host of a nationally syndicated radio show, The Deep Dive. Nick, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, happy to do it. And looking forward to the conversation.
You know, we got to start with your origin story. How did you get here? Because everybody has a unique journey. Are you a computer scientist by training, or how did this journey begin?
Well, when I landed on this planet, no. No. So long story short, my 90-second life story. I got my very first computer when I was 5 years old. And yes, I'm going back that far. And my dad went to work the next day and I took it apart piece by piece, screw by screw. And when he got home and got done whooping me, I put it back together and it turned on. And at that point, I didn't know how to use it, but my dad saw something there and said, okay, we're going to let him go. And by virtue of that, here we are. I built my first computer at age 7. I could program in 12 languages by the time I was 9. Started getting my first certifications way back in the day when I was like 12, 13 years old. Broke into my first system at age 14. That's when the recruiters started. And then basically at 19, founded Windy City Networks. And here we are. So I like to say it's not in my blood, it's in my DNA. I absolutely love this job.
Well, I was going to ask for parents right now of young children who want to get them interested in computers. Was there something, a secret sauce, something that happened that really drove your interest, or is just a natural attraction?
I was honestly just fascinated by it. How does it work? Once I put it back together and it worked, I want to know everything. How could I get this to work? Not just play games, but I was the one at like 6 that actually set up the printer because my dad couldn't figure it out. And then I wanted them to talk to each other. And once I figured out they could talk to each other, how do I break it? How do I capture it? How does that work? It's always been fascinating to me. And so when I was growing up, I was either in school playing soccer or on a computer, and when in high school, it was, I was in high school on the computer or trying to get a girlfriend. I mean, that's essentially, what it was for me. And it's just always been there. And interestingly enough, parents today actually have a ton of resources that we simply didn't have. You've got coding camp, coding for kids starting at a very young age. You've got basically build it yourself computer kits like Kano and some others. And so like right now we are building basically a new generation of developers of those that can create on computers at a very intimate level. And I think it's a fantastic thing because quite frankly, technology drives the world. It's the engine of the economy. Yeah. So it's a great thing to have.
Wow. So what was your first computer?
My very first computer was, and for the record, we're talking about 1984, not to date myself here.
No, that's good.
Yep. It was an IBM PC Junior, no hard drives. It had a 5 1/4, 2 cartridges, and an 8086 in it.
It wasn't even an 8088.
No, my dad splurged and got 256K. which was more than we ever were going to need in our entire lives. And it was a
Two
fantastic
floppy
computer.
drives.
What?
You had two floppy drives in it?
No, I had one floppy drive, one 5 1/4, and then it had cartridges. So my first operating system was actually Microsoft Basic 1.0, and I still have the cartridge at my mom's house. I should retrieve that. And then from there it was DOS. So I learned Basic, and then I learned DOS, and that was my start.
Hey, there's a lot of underpinnings of DOS in Windows even today.
Oh yeah, how many times we use a command prompt for something, right?
There you go. And who was the first hack? What was the first hack?
For legal purposes, I cannot say, but it was a government entity.
Oh, so you did it just because you wanted. What were
Yeah.
you a fan of war games? Because that puts you in that.
So yeah, oh my God, I loved war games growing up. Hackers in the '90s. I mean,
Yep.
Angelina Jolie aside, that was a great movie. Sneakers was another one that I loved, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I was just a big fan of that kind of stuff. But I just, like I said, I've been a nerd my whole life. Just always really enjoyed it.
And you've created some laws around cybersecurity, and I want to get to that. Okay.
Sure.
Because, a lot of our audience that's in the small, medium business space has some interesting views on cybersecurity. Not that the enterprise doesn't.
Sure.
They got some interesting views too, right?
Mm-hmm.
But before we get to that, what do you think the biggest challenge is? Why can't companies get cybersecurity right? Let me ask the most general question there is.
So that's kind of a loaded question in terms
Yes,
of
it
what
is.
companies can't do right. I think one of the biggest problems we have, I actually wrote this article for Forbes, I want to say like a year and a half ago or so, is we have a major problem right now, essentially with burnout in cybersecurity. A lot of cybersecurity professionals, especially at the CISO level, they cannot hire because we have a hiring deficit that, colleges and universities are trying to crank out. But we all know that there's no real experience after you come out of college, right? You have to gain that experience. So losing veterans as they are retiring, and studies have shown, I think it was Mimecast that had a study on that said within 2 years, we're going to lose something like 30 to 50% of cybersecurity executives because they're not getting budgets. There's no relief from data breaches. It's nonstop right now. And so it's just easier to go open a puppy daycare or sit on a beach than it is, to be in cybersecurity. I think that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is the human element. And if you're looking at any kind of security system throughout history, even before the invention of the microprocessor, humans trust. And that is one of the biggest problems that we have, is that, yes, Prince Ubuntu does need help with his revolution, or it is my boss sending me, this email that I need to click and send money immediately because it's urgent. We have a huge problem with that. And I think every organization, especially those that even do awareness training, see that one person that opens it every single time. Like 9 times out of 10, it's the CEO, but there's always that person that just falls for everything, that trusts. And I think it's our biggest issue that we've got in technology right now.
Is it trust, or is it ignorance and naivety? I said that
Well,
wrong. Yeah.
They go hand in hand. Right? I mean, if you're willfully ignorant on something, it's one part you, another part, maybe nobody's told you something, right? And so by virtue of that, trust can stem from ignorance, or trust can stem from things like the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Like, in other words, I think I'm that good that I'm always right and I'm never going to fall for this. And guess who falls for it, right? And
The
so
guy who said, yeah, or gal.
Right. And so these are things. I mean, I've literally been on stage and I've seen, especially older people, like, oh, I'll never get hacked. Well, you're the largest demographic for getting hit constantly, and because it's going to be over the telephone, right? And think about the world that they lived in. They had one information news source, where today we're blasted with disinformation, misinformation, misguidance as well as guidance. And it's hard oftentimes to discern. But when you grew up and you got your news from Walter Cronkite and you didn't get to pick from politically motivated anything, it was just the news. It's a much different animal, right? There's a level of trust there in older generations that younger generations growing up in a less stable society simply have. And so I think it's really our biggest issue. And it is, to your point, it is ignorance. But at the end of the day, the foundation of all of this is the trust that we place in ourselves, in the systems, and also the people around us.
So you look at corporations. Why haven't we seen, there's awareness training But
Sure.
that's training. That to me is like sexual harassment training. It's what not to do, hygiene kind of a check that
Right.
you check the box, sign the manual and say, yeah, I did it. Okay.
Right.
Why is there not, or is there an emphasis on creating a culture of cybersecurity, which is a totally different mindset
Right.
than an awareness training?
Right. That's exactly one of the points that we in cybersecurity are trying to make, that this is baked in. And a lot of organizations think, okay, we've got technology, cybersecurity is simply a bolt on. These are the things we have to do to check the box, to do whatever it is, when it should be stem to stern, something that is the ground up. And as I'm advising global CISOs of Fortune 100 or even mid-sized businesses, it really starts with the CEO. The C-level has to be the biggest cheerleaders. It has to be a top-down thing. And when you see the CEOs of the world not getting on board, or the CFOs treating nickels like manhole covers and not giving the spend that cybersecurity needs based on risk, we end up with a situation where the staff is going to follow along. They simply see, oh, well, the boss isn't doing it. Why should I? Or we allow things outside of discipline policies to actually be enforced. So shadow IT is another big one where somebody says, you know what, I'm going to go from A to B in a different way than my company tells me to because it's easier for me. And nobody's correcting that. And so that kind of creep sets in, that kind of culture sets in. But to your point,
there's a lot of, if you don't let me do it my way, then you can't hold me accountable for the results. You're putting me to a result. So a sales VP, I'll just pick on them. They got a quota. They got to make a number. And their team says, well, we need A, B, and C. And he's like, well, you know what? I have authority to sign off on that. So I'm going to put that in.
Right. But then that also speaks to the lack of change management in the culture as well. So we have a standing rule in my company. Anybody, I don't care if you're the first, the juniorest person, you're 22 or you're 58, whatever you are, or if you work for me, you have every right to come to me and say, Nick, you're an idiot. But you have to tell me why, and you have to give me a solution. Because if I am missing something and I can't fix what I can't see, then how are we going to get something done? If something is horribly inefficient and everybody's complaining about it and nobody actually goes through a change management process, then we get exactly what you're talking about, where somebody just goes off book, makes it easier, and then half the staff goes with it. Right. And so by virtue of that, it still has to be a top-down situation. It falls under that umbrella. And by virtue of that, it has to start with the C level. If the C level is not either putting out good change management or is ignoring the problems they've got and letting people do what they want, inefficiencies creep in, and therefore vulnerability creeps in because you're introducing possibly new technology or systems or cloud to the ecosystem that you've created and secured, and now you're opening holes that you didn't know you had. And so it's a big issue that a lot of organizations have, and there are ways to correct it, but it really is top down.
Well, give me your view on these couple items then. So
Sure.
The first is that typically when you see the CFO not giving budget or the C-level not giving budget, a lot of times in their mind, cybersecurity is purely a tech problem. Mm-hmm. And the CISO or the security team, and I'm saying this with grace, they don't know how to communicate the risk in terms that the bosses will understand in terms of economic impact.
Yes.
Second part is, the CISO reporting to the CIO is an inherent conflict of interest.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
100%.
Because that guy is responsible for operationally keeping the company going. And the CISO is responsible for calling out gaps in what he or she has created and then closing those gaps.
Right.
How many people are going to continuously be critical of their boss when they got a condo in Florida to pay for and a bonus and a whole bunch of other things that are that are riding on it, right? And the third piece that goes with this is this general attitude that cybersecurity, well, it's not my problem. In most companies, it's like, well, we got some guy, Jake in the back room with a hoodie on that handles all that for us. So how do you address those three things? And there might be even more, but they came to mind right.
Well, and let's take these one at a time. First things first, I think every CISO, especially those that I've been consulting with, need to learn nerd to English translation. CISO is a relatively new position in the C level. Most of the time, it's not even a C level,
Right.
even though it has C in the word, right?
But it's not a
But
C level. Yeah.
right. But a lot of times they come from deeply technical backgrounds. And so by virtue of that, you're stuck in your own world. And so one of the things when I'm talking to CISOs and even CIOs is you've got to speak the language of business. It is so unbelievably important to understand that at the end of the day, cybersecurity is a quantification and then indemnification of risk. The tools
That's
come
right.
later. You've got to understand where your vulnerabilities are. You've got to understand the financial hurt. So your CFO understands that you're not some flaming pit of technology that's on fire that he's shoveling money into. This is one of the critical things that we've got to understand. And so as I'm advising CISOs or CIOs, I basically say, look, understand this. The engine of the economy for your business is technology. I don't care if you're in construction and healthcare and finance, if you're making widgets, it doesn't matter. Technology is the driver of your business. It is the engine of your economy. Without technology, your machines won't work. You can't bill. You can't communicate. You can't do anything. That's why you need standards and practices for infrastructure, IT support. The CIO is keeping the lights on, managing the infrastructure that is driving the engine of the economy. And the cybersecurity team is the shield for that engine. We're the early warning sensors on the car before it hits. Then we're the airbags and the seatbelt and everything else. That is what we are talking about. And if you cannot convey these things in a plain English or whatever language you speak manner, you're never going to get anywhere. It is the biggest problem that we have at the C level getting this stuff done. And when I'm walking through a risk register with a CFO and a CEO there alongside their CISO and CIO, it's like lights have opened because, oh my God, we're going to lose this much. And it's not a hypothetical. These are your actual numbers. These are your direct costs, your indirect costs. And now you start to see the footprint of, well, if we're literally losing $1 million a week, spending $150,000 on a better firewall or whatever is exactly what we need to do, because quite frankly, that's more affordable than that. And these are conversations that we just don't see at any real level, or they're approached by the CISOs and sometimes the CIOs of the world, although that's a more veteran position. So the CISOs will basically say, oh, we need this EDR, we need this firewall, we need this because it protects us. Well, that is well and good, and everybody understands the concept, but until you make it impactful, until you understand, or rather the C-level understands how you defending them basically completes the CEO's 3-year,
Right.
5-year, 10-year vision, you're just spitting into the wind. You're screaming into the void, and it's a huge problem we see. And very few CEOs come from technical backgrounds, so it's not like they're going to understand inherently just how important cybersecurity is, especially when we were the redheaded stepchild in the technological room for decades. I mean, I started my first business in '98, focused on cybersecurity, and nobody wanted to buy anything. Nobody wanted to talk about this because it's, if it ain't broke, we don't fix it. We've had that old Cisco firewall since Cisco was founded, and we're never going to change it until it breaks. Like these are things that we see constantly. And by virtue of that, it is up to us, the CISOs of the world, to convey this. I recommend taking business classes, learn the language of finance, understand risk at a deep level. And if you're coming up the ranks as like an IT director or a cybersecurity analyst, and you're thinking it's all the tools that you've got and the protection that you've got, you're missing the boat. It's a huge problem. And I will now get off my soapbox, but it just drives me up a wall. It really does.
It absolutely does. So take the second part of that then. How does the CIO and CISO combination actually work together?
Drinking. Lots of drinking. Yeah. So the way I look at it is to your point, I think that organizations that put the CISO underneath either the CIO or, God forbid, the CFO, because then nothing gets done. I think they're doing themselves a disservice. The CISO should be essentially reporting to the board like any other chief should be. And by virtue of that, they've got the autonomy, to your point that you said earlier, to essentially audit and ensure that the infrastructure is secure, that standards and practices are being met, that compliance is being adhered to, whatever that standard is. And if you are putting that under, let's say, the CIO, well, then the CIO can overrule what could potentially be a life-saving change to the organization. And so I think it's one of the biggest issues we've got.
Absolutely. And what about, well, it's not my job. The general user community. Why do I care, man? I just come in here and make my widget and I go home.
Right. Well, part of that is hearts and minds. And you're always going to find people, I don't care what organization, big or small, that are not going to care no matter how much you try to pound it into them. Can't put a gun to their head, can't force them to do things in that sense. But what you can do is you can help guide. And one of the biggest things that when I'm talking about this is you don't want to be that person that loses that organization millions of dollars. Right. I've literally been in the room interviewing these people in the aftermath of some kind of incident, some kind of breach, some kind of massive money loss. We had one that was moving money through a financial advisor, quote unquote, for months. They lost millions until they realized, hey, something's not right here. And the actual financial advisor called and said, am I fired? Like, why aren't you guys answering my emails?
Wow.
And their response is, what are you talking about? We've been moving money like crazy for you. Being in that room, interviewing that person, I mean, she was a wreck. Is she going to get fired? Is the company going to go under? It's a heartbreaking situation to be in, and it's a tough one to be in. And I think that's for the people that say, it's not my job. Well, you don't want to be the weakest link. I mean, secondarily, you also have discipline policies, right? So if the person is super violating it, then, maybe they're not a good fit for the organization. Right. And then that's a tough call to make, but that's essentially, I think, the name of the game there.
So you mentioned vulnerability a couple minutes ago, and that brings us to the first law of cybersecurity. Why don't you take us down the path here?
So the first law of cybersecurity is if there's a vulnerability, it will be exploited. No exceptions. Okay. And think about that. I mean, the world's full of this.
Oh, it totally is. So when you look at the CISA top 10, forget about that. People don't even get the top 3 for the most part, right? But when you look at vulnerabilities, and we put this in context, a lot of companies would come back and say, for us to close all the vulnerabilities is not practically possible for us. So what do you do? Because there's things known, there's a lot of unknowns that they don't know about, but
sure.
Right?
Sure.
And where do you reach a point of diminishing returns?
Well, and on the reverse side of that, the software that we're buying, the developers know that they are releasing it under deadlines with vulnerabilities baked in that they will fix later. They know that they are releasing software with vulnerabilities. Let that sink in for a second. But this really comes down to understanding the quantification of risk. You might have 10 different vulnerabilities. Let's just use easy numbers here. 2 of those might be, oh my God, jaw dropping, bomb dropping, like, holy cow, a 3rd grade class, I could teach how to break into this place. Maybe you start there. But if you don't understand overarchingly through some kind of assessment, like a risk assessment, cybersecurity assessment based on a standard controls framework, think like NIST 800-171 or ISO 27001 for risk, then you're basically playing whack-a-mole with this. And so when you are approaching a situation like that where you have vulnerability and you're not going to get to everything, we just earlier talked about staffing shortages, burnout, all those kinds of things, you start with the most urgent and important vulnerabilities based on that risk assessment. What's the likelihood of this happening to your organization, like a ransomware attack? What's the impact that a ransomware attack would have? And if those things are, it's really likely and it would be super bad, maybe start mitigating that first, right? As opposed to the one that's like, somebody breaks into your wireless. Well, we're in the middle of nowhere. Nobody's going to do that. Okay, fix that one later. These are quantifications that every organization has to go through. And if you're not doing it at that level, you're seriously missing the boat.
Yeah, which, if you're going to look at the vulnerability, you first have to assess all the assets. I would venture most organizations don't know what all the assets are that are genuinely making sausage in the sausage factory.
Yes. And there's a reason why, if you're looking at the standard framework for like NIST 800-171, the very first subcontrol is asset management after the 5 categories, identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. And asset management, to that point, if you don't know where your assets are, how do you know they're not being stolen? How do you know they're, being updated or even defended? Maybe they all don't have endpoint agents on them, right? Like asset management is just 101 for cybersecurity. It's super, super important and it's super critical. And so as we are talking about risk, I mean, having a lack of an asset management, standard system process, whatever that is an issue. Conversely, we see people try to do it in a non-automated way and it falls down. Like when we're doing assessments and like, here's our Excel file, oh my God, you don't know when like Bob in accounting just bought a printer, right? Or somebody went to Best Buy and got a laptop and now it's, so automating these things is the other side of that coin because asset management is stale as soon as it's done. right? It's a constantly living document, living, breathing database, however you're doing it, but it's got to be done and it's got to be consistent.
That's right. And you just, when you said Bob in IT just bought a printer, I kid you not, there was an organization that we know that brought a brand new TV from a famous manufacturer that had microphones and cameras in it.
Yep. Yep.
And they learned the hard way. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor, Kiteworks. Federal agencies and contractors must adopt the NSA's robust zero trust data security model to combat escalating cyber threats. Kiteworks provides the comprehensive capabilities needed to reach the highest zero trust data pillar maturity levels defined by the NSA. Elevate your data security posture to meet escalating threats and stringent federal guidelines with kiteworks.com to learn how Kiteworks can accelerate your journey to NSA's zero trust data pillar maturity. That's kiteworks.com.
Our favorite was, I kid you, I swear to God, this is a true story. We were doing an assessment and we start with asset identification inside the network. Okay, like where are the assets? What is probable and vulnerable? And we found, I swear to God, we found a toaster in the break room that you basically was connected to wireless and you could send pictures to the toaster and then it would print it on bread. So you want your face on bread or whatever like this. This thing was like running like Linux 0.1. I mean, we hacked the heck out of this thing and we exfiltrated part of a database through it. We were able to establish credentials through the OS and copy out a database for it. And I was this close to actually printing out part of their final report on a piece of toast and handing it to their CEO. But I thought that would have been a total jerk move. But nobody knew. IT was mystified that this thing was there. And what happened was one of the sales guys on a sales junket to China saw it in the window of a Chinese store, thought this would be very novel to do, brought it back, got an adapter and plugged it right into the network. China, so you never know,
but
right?
That gets you to OT though, right? I mean, so when you're looking at asset management,
OT is no different.
This is an unsolvable issue almost in many ways, right? I mean, you got the toaster, we had the TV, the newer refrigerators,
Sure.
Someone might be running a little massager for their back in their office
right,
that's connected.
Right.
What do you do with that? Or is that learn segmentation well?
Well, I mean, so that's part of it. I mean, the best, most secure companies are those that don't give out wireless passwords, right? You have an internal, network for your IT, OT, ICS, whatever you're running. And the only people that have it are the IT administrators. And you might have a fully segregated, whether it's virtual or physical, guest network. I mean, you want to bring in an automated back scratcher, it goes on the guest network, or it doesn't go anywhere at all. Those companies that play fast and loose, especially with like BYOD, bring your own device policies, like it is one of the biggest issues that we've got in risk indemnification, not to mention legal indemnification for the companies, right? Because let's say I'm that employee and I get fired and it's a bad breakup, like screw this company, and they go ahead and try to like wipe their data off my device. And I'm not talking about blowing away my pictures, but like excising out their Office 365 connection, those kinds of things. You're technically doing that without express consent. And the courts here in the United States have been favoring the terminated employee over the corporation. And a lot of organizations don't know this. They don't have bring your own device policies. Our default recommendation is the same one that every major framework has, is don't use personal devices. Everything should be company owned. Like everything in my company is owned by the corporation. I can blow anything away at will. If anybody tries to do something personal, it's locked down. They can't. And so this is what we're talking about, but again, this is another risk footprint that organizations have and they just don't realize.
Well, it's a risk and a cost thing, right? Because for the company to issue cell phones and iPads and things of that nature to employees, there's a real cost to that. And they're like,
Sure. But it goes down to, but that goes right back to risk quantification. So, okay, understanding, let's say that you can't put an MDM or your cocktail of Big Brother defense on a personal device because your employees have every right to say, no, it's a personal device. Understand the risk footprint. by virtue of that, it means, okay, as an employee on a personal device, what do I have access to? What is potentially stored on that device? How risky is my device? Is it like a 10-year-old phone because I'm cheap, that has no updates on it, or is it brand new, fully updated, encrypted by default, which all the new Androids and iPhones are, and then understand if, okay, I get breached on my phone and the attacker has access to my email or a database or whatever, what's the financial fallout? And if that financial fallout is vastly worse than just buying a whole bunch of cheap phones that you can 100% control for your staff, well, maybe you should be buying phones. Or if it's not and saying, oh, this is such a minor thing, well, then you put policies around it. In other words, I, as an employee, have to sign a BYOD policy that says I will bring my own antivirus into this or whatever. And here's a list of approved vendors that I can use, that I'll vet my stuff, whatever that policy you want it to say. And if I'm an employee that wants to use my mobile phone, now I've got to sign it. And if I don't adhere to that, I could be terminated. So there are ways to indemnify yourself, but the default is if you're best indemnified when no personal devices are at play ever.
Okay. So now we're still on the first law with vulnerabilities here. It'll be exploited. On vulnerabilities, because there's just so much we would probably spend the rest of the time on just this topic. But
sure.
The other thing I wanted to get to, we know about tech vulnerabilities that we can figure out. And what about process vulnerabilities? So
sure.
To me, those are equal, if not even more important. Like if I know I want to compromise your company, Nick, I'm going to case you out. I want to understand your habits,
sure,
how you do things,
sure,
what you're up to, how you guys
right.
send money, figure out all the
right.
steps in the process,
right,
and then insert myself at the right moment.
right.
Right. So that is not a technical vulnerability. Those are process vulnerabilities. So what do you advise on that?
Yeah. So that basically goes to law number 3, if you will, humans trust even when they shouldn't. Right. And so by virtue of it, it comes down to the training, but it also comes down to putting processes in place that would mitigate this kind of defense. And I'll give you 2 stories of what we recently saw in the news.
Please.
The first one was a major real estate corporation out of China where they deep faked a Zoom meeting with a deep fake CFO that looked and sounded exactly like the actual CFO, deep faked other executives to basically fish the controller or the financial person in that company to say, move $30 million from China to here.
That was
and the guy's like,
all over the place.
Yeah. The guy's like, oh, well, that's the CFO. I can't say no to him. He's my boss. Here's all my other bosses all agreeing with him, and here we are. They didn't put any kind of mechanism in place to allow that employee to have a further check. The other one that we saw recently was Ferrari, maker of Italian exotic cars. Their CEO was spoofed right down to his southern Italian accent, not a generic Italian accent, a southern Italian accent, and started fishing like an executive vice president. And so it started with text messages. Hey, we need to talk. It's the CEO, blah, blah, blah. I'm on my personal phone, not my Ferrari owned phone, blah, blah, blah. But we need to move money to China. Like we're doing a deal. And so they get on the phone and the executive vice president starts, hey, something's not right. And so what did he do? He asked a question, and he asked the question of, I've got to verify that it's you. What was the book that you recommended to me last week? And what did he do in that moment, right? Because that's not something that's going to be on LinkedIn or Facebook or classmates.com or anywhere else where you're getting public intelligence on anybody. What you are saying in that moment is something that is unique to you and me. I got an email years ago from somebody that I went to high school with, possibly, and said, hey, I've got an issue here. Can I borrow some money, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, you've got to verify who you are. We got on the phone and he told me a story that happened to us in high school. That's not public knowledge. Only the people involved would know that. I was like, okay, it's clearly you. I haven't talked to you in a while. I'll help you out. So you never know, but that's what we're talking about. The human condition makes us want to trust. We want to trust our boss. When our boss says jump, we say,
jump.
How high, right?
How high, yeah.
Right. I mean, and so that's what we're banking on. Humans trust even when they shouldn't. And if you watch my TED Talk, I fooled the entire audience before that law. Go watch it. You can see what I did. But it's amazing. And why? Why was I able to fool them? I'm an authority on stage. They are watching me as a subject matter expert talk about cybersecurity. So when I tell them to do something, they're going to do it. Right. And so understand what we are banking on by exploiting you. It's humans trust, and if you break down what a hacker does, it's simply this: we lie to you. We lie to you, whether you fall for Prince Ubuntu from Nigeria, whether you think the system is secure when it's actually not, when you think the $20 antivirus that you bought is going to turn your computer into Fort Knox, and it won't. We trust, and it gets us in trouble every time. It's a huge thing, and we need trust in our life. We should be able to trust our spouses to some extent, our kids, our family members, all that. But we see what happens when trust breaks down in society. We're going through a very political, contentious election right now,
Right.
and you can see through disinformation the wedge and the lack of trust between two sides, and it's not healthy. But when it comes to our technological life, we have to build a filter of distrust. This is our biggest problem in cybersecurity, hands down. Hands down.
If we do that, though, then some people will say it won't be a fun place to work, or our company culture will change in a way that we're no longer that service oriented organization. That's, there's all kinds of excuses you hear.
Sure. But you have to balance the good with the bad. And what I mean by that is simply this: like, as you are developing a culture, you can have a great culture, but if it comes down to a financial transaction, why not have an extra step? And if
Yeah.
everybody's aware of it, then it's commonplace. And if you don't do it, you should be called out on it. Like, hey, Nick, you were supposed to challenge me, when I asked you to move money and you didn't do that. You just automatically assumed. It's a teaching moment. The whole point of having a phishing simulation or awareness training or whatever it is not a gotcha moment. It's a we're all in this together moment. It really is a hearts and minds issue that we are all working together to make the chain as strong as we possibly can, because anybody from the janitor to the assistant to the CEO or the CEO himself or herself can get phished. And by virtue of that, we have different levels of access, different levels of issues. Look at every major data breach that we've got. Hands down, by far, phishing is the way they got in. We just recently learned that, the Iranian intelligence got into a major US campaign. And how do they do that? By spear phishing one of the leaders of that campaign. Everybody thinks it's a Trump campaign, but Microsoft, who caught this, isn't saying if it's Trump or Harris or one of the other smaller candidates, or if it was successful or not. But the point is that we are getting in through phishing because we are establishing that trust.
Well, I think the group that keeps the insurance stats, they had a number out there that 90% of all cybersecurity breaches are the result of human error. I found that staggering.
Yeah. Well, and it
Not
speaks to
because
phishing.
technology, not because of solar winds or,
Right. Right. No. So think about it this way. If you are looking at per FBI statistic, how long it takes to break into a single to one organization and steal a single file that's moderately defended, it's hundreds of days. And people have this assumption of like, oh, it's 60 seconds. I asked this on stage, like 60 seconds, a minute, 5 minutes, something like that. And I usually go to them. I'm like, I'm that slow? 5 minutes, really? And it's like 224 days per FBI statistic. But we cut that way down with phishing.
That's
if
right.
We're trying to break in technologically and hit your encryption or find a vulnerability in your firewall, it does happen. We get those cases, but 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 that we see and the industry sees per the studies that you're mentioning are simply somebody fell for something. Somebody trusted when they shouldn't. That's human error, and it's a huge problem. And you can have standards and practices. Like if you go on to LinkedIn right now and you look up my company, the only employee you will see of my company is me. It's a standard policy because we're not trying to build a big footprint. You leave here, feel free to put yourself in the rearview mirror on LinkedIn. That's totally fine. But if you are working for me, you are not saying that you are, because we're targeted, as is every organization. It's not part of our marketing footprint. In the same way, we're building a new website. I'm not going to put who I work with on the website, or I'm not going to put products that we happen to recommend at this moment, because one, those change, but two, I'm now building a roadmap and giving you a customer list. Like, why would I do that? Right. And organizations don't think along these lines. And by virtue of that, you look at any major, let's say MSP IT provider out there. Oh, we gladly work with all of these, and why? They might work with Target because they want to get Home Depot and Walmart and all the others. Well, you're putting it out there, and now guess how they're finding to break into Target? They're finding the HVAC contractor that put it out on their website, hitting the HVAC contractor to get into Target. These are things that we don't, take into consideration, but it really does come down to trust, and you trust your website's going to be secure. Well, maybe it is, but not necessarily the information.
There's so many cases on that. So shouldn't that be the first law of cybersecurity then?
So the reason why it's not is because law number 5 is When in doubt, see law number 1. If there's a vulnerability, it will be exploited. And human trust is a vulnerability. So whether it's trust in a system, whether it's the system itself that has a vulnerability that nobody's discovered yet, we're going to find it. I mean, think about this. We try to break into everything. We even have a website called Lifehacker where you can hack your closet to make it more efficient, or, hack your car to have it go faster, whatever it is. This is what we do as a human species. We're a curious people. And by virtue of that, we're trying to game systems, work around it. Lord knows, if I could find some loophole in the IRS, I would never pay taxes again. I'd love to hack that system. Can I claim everybody here as livestock and get a discount? These are things that we're always trying to look at. We're always trying to game the system, whether it's jumping the line to get into the stadium faster, breaking into a system. We do this naturally. Some guy here, I'm in Chicago, so we have automatic tolling with little transponders.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the transponder, it takes a picture of your license plate. When this first came out, some guy figured out, I could cover my license plate and drive down the highway for free. And so then what does the state of Illinois say? Okay, if you do it, now it's like a fine that's like 5 times more expensive than a speeding ticket or whatever it is to thwart that. It's a constant cat and mouse game, but we're always looking to innovate. We're always looking to innovate around systems.
So what is law number 2? That we've gone to 1, 3, and 5.
If there's law number 1, if there's a vulnerability, it will be exploited, no exceptions. Law number 2, everything is vulnerable in some way. We may not know it yet. We may not see it yet, but there is a vulnerability.
What surprises me is that in this day and age, there are people that still think that when they buy that tech, whatever it may be, whether it's that $40 Costco antivirus solution or a snazzy new firewall, that makes them bulletproof. When we all know that the unsinkable Titanic sank.
Right. Well, and think about the 2 big pushes that the cybersecurity community has had in the last 5 to 7 years. It's not the low-hanging fruit, because everybody knows you need some kind of endpoint detection. You need a firewall. That's the checkbox. The 2 big things have been identity access management, because we have so many stolen usernames and passwords just floating around in the dark web for free, mind you, let alone, paying for the newer ones. But the other one has been supply chain due diligence, right? We are in the era of the cloud. I mean, how many corporations are you still using servers, especially at the mid-sized level or at the enterprise level? A lot of it is going to the cloud. They're being hosted by the Microsofts and Amazons and Oracles and IBMs of the world. Well, have you done your due diligence on them? And the other side of it too is that you've got old infrastructure, people that are veterans that know the computers very well, and just assume spinning up a virtual Windows server in AWS or Azure is the same thing, when it's not. Microsoft, AWS, they give you a ton of different security controls. And if you don't use them, it's not on Amazon's fault, right? It's on you. We literally had a customer that was using Amazon to the tune of about $3,000 a month or so. They got a bill for $95,000 in a month. That's when they became a client. Like, something's wrong, So we found that somebody had put a crypto miner on essentially one of their virtual machines and then turned on the gas, and they didn't have auto scaling basically capped. And so it just kept consuming and consuming and consuming to the point of $95,000 when it was caught. And so we basically excised the virus. They went to Amazon and said, well, $92,000 of this is fraudulent. Like, this is not us. This was malicious, blah, blah, blah. And Amazon said, that's great. Where's our $95,000?
That's right. And that's in the contract.
We gave you all the tools. We gave you the tools. You didn't use them. It's not on us. So
that's
you've
ironically what, CrowdStrike is making that claim against Delta right now. They're saying, we offered you help.
Oh, so that is an interesting one. And the reason why that's an interesting one is because I think CrowdStrike is partially right. It is a shared responsibility that we have, right? Because you have to have, as part of a contingency plan, a total outage and how you're going to recover from that. Whether it's a ransomware event, whether somebody glug released early, a CrowdStrike update. We don't necessarily have all the facts yet, but the point is, that's a shared responsibility. Why was American Airlines up restoring process in something like 2 to 3 hours? And I was actually in the airport. I was in O'Hare flying to Raleigh, for vacation. And I did nothing but just send out CrowdStrike memes all day as I was delayed for hours. I had nothing better to do. But I called my clients that were on CrowdStrike. One of them had 16,000 endpoints, and I was talking to their CIO, and he's like, "I think I'm just going to quit today." Like, we've got 45 people that can handle this, and like, this is one at a time. Like, we're not prepared for this. But I had a client with almost 100,000 endpoints on CrowdStrike, and they got critical operations up in under 2 hours.
Wow. So they actually had done, they probably had real disaster recovery in place.
Yeah. That's the point, is that you build incident response plans and contingency plans specifically for this kind of disaster. This is a ransomware event, if you think about it in that sense, where everything is locked out. It's just easier to fix because you don't have to decrypt everything or negotiate with some jerk. You'll get a $10 gift card from CrowdStrike, but for pizza or whatever they were setting up. What a joke. But the point is, though, is that you treat it in the same way. You've got response plans. Everybody knows their job. You've got check-ins. You execute. And if you can't do that, you're Delta Airlines, and yeah, Delta has every right to point the finger at CrowdStrike, but they've got to own that too. They really do.
And they have some responsibility in this.
Oh, sure.
And I think, that contract language, again, you look at your vendor contracts, because that has to be part of your risk.
Yeah.
When you're capped at the limit of the contract as liability, think about it.
Yeah.
And that's standard in the industry.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's only so much that CrowdStrike can do. And to that point, it's the same with Amazon. If Amazon has an outage on the back end, that's on Amazon. If you don't control, your front end, if you don't use all the security tools or options or use third parties or whatever, that's on you. It really is. Everything is a shared responsibility in technology. It's the organization and the providers. And one of them falls down, you've got to plan for that. You've got to prepare if you've got an outage like that.
So what's law number 4?
Law number 4 is, with innovation comes opportunity for exploitation.
All right.
And so if you think about it, the world's full of brilliant people, right? I mean, Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone that made the world a whole lot closer. Microsoft, Bill Gates created a operating system that got humanity on the same technological page. Mark Zuckerberg basically built a platform that billions use, to share their lives and be data mined to the nth degree. But we also have to understand that with these advancements, we see hacking, we see exploitation, we see a trust that shouldn't be there as well. And so that's one of the biggest issues. And look at any advancing technology or any evolving ransomware. The Mirai virus, is one of those. We found vulnerabilities in pacemakers that shouldn't have vulnerabilities through the Bluetooth that could literally kill a man. So as we continue to innovate and create these amazing new things, we can't forget to actually defend these things, bake in good development practices, bake in security as we're building the next technological wonders.
That's true, but it's always going to be that battle between convenience and security. And I have a feeling convenience wins 9.9 out of 10 times.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why, most people don't have MFA on Facebook, per studies, is because they try to get you to sign up as fast as humanly possible. And if you go looking and digging for it, you can enable it. But yes, we're not a security first society. And that's primarily because everybody's trying to get everybody to sign up. Now, some of that is changing, especially on the business side. Microsoft is giving us better logging, even if you have the cheapest level, of logging. They're trying to enforce MFA right out of the gate, no exceptions. I think that's a great thing. But when you look at it, like, there's no MFA on like a Netflix or a Hulu, anything like that. You got your credit card in there. I mean,
that
you're
credit
relying
card's
on
been
that.
Compromised so many times. It doesn't. I look, if you're an American, your age, home address, social security number,
right,
date of birth. I think at this point, it's out.
Yeah, Equifax did that for us. That was awesome. But yeah, no, I mean, and that's the point, right? It's also, I wrote an article for Forbes years ago on why we need to stop using Social Security as a de facto national identity. Like, my God, my Social Security number, like yours, is out there. I don't know how many times.
How many times?
So freezing our credit and monitoring, right?
Policy isn't catching up either, right? I mean, they're still in the 1930s with this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the U.S. Congress right now, I don't think they could vote for what to have for lunch at this point, let alone, any kind of cybersecurity laws and policies, or, a new encrypted, national identity or something along those lines. We're stuck in that moment. Fortunately, there are others that are leading the way, but I wish we would as well.
Yeah. Totally agree. Well, hey, we're at the end of this hour, but I wanted to give you a couple minutes to go ahead and plug whatever you'd like. You got anything new and exciting coming out that you want all the
Um,
listeners to know about? Sell them something.
so yes, well, in terms of public events, I'll be speaking at Compliance Week in October.
Okay.
There'll be a lot of interesting people there, including Linda Khan from the FTC, the head of the FTC, and some others. And so I think that'll be a fun time. It's in October in Boston. Other than that, you can like, share, follow me, Facebook and Twitter or X or whatever they're calling it this week, at Nick AESP, or YouTube /Nick Espinosa, and come say hi, come hang out. I love interacting.
Well, that's fantastic. No new books coming out?
Working on one, but don't want to say too much just yet. But I actually owe my editor an email now that you say that. But but anyway, yeah, working on that one as well. And of course, I've got the nationally syndicated radio show, hopefully on a NPR or Pacifica affiliate near you. So,
well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Any movie deals coming up?
So I was a while ago in talks to do a reality show that fell through when they figured out just how hard hacking was to put on screen. But that's the closest I've come. So
well, Nick, we've only scratched the surface. We'd love to have you back sometime and
sure,
go much deeper. This is, I think there's getting into some of these cases, and because we didn't even touch on the topic that people don't believe that it can happen to them, right?
Yeah.
And there is that falsehood, or I'm not interesting enough. I'm not interesting enough. It'll never happen to me.
Right.
You know?
Right. Well, as long as you got a good credit score, you can be boring, but man, that 750 or more credit score really, all good.
All right. Hey, well, Nick, thank you so much. You've been fantastic, and we'll look forward to the next time.
Looking forward to it too. Thanks for having me.